This happened nearly 20 years ago when I was 5. My family lived in a trailer park, and I basically had free reign to roam around, as long as I didn't actually leave the trailer park. One rainy day, a friend and I decided to meet at a playground in the center of the trailer park and hang out. Usually, we would have stayed on the playground, but for some reason that day, we felt like just walking around, seeing what kind of adventures we could get ourselves into. This ended up being an awful idea, and the adventure was not fun in the slightest. Due to the rain, there weren't a lot of people hanging around outside that day, so the streets we were walking down were pretty much empty. At one point, a car pulls up next to us. The driver was a kind of thin guy with a mustache. In the passenger seat was a much bigger bald man. They both looked old enough to be my dad. The driver rolled down his windows and looks us up and down.
Aren't you kids a little young to be walking around by yourselves?
I should preface this by saying that at this point in time, I hadn't quite grasped the concept of stranger danger yet. I obliviously smiled at him and replied, "Nope, my mom says I can go anywhere I want in the park." My friend kicked me, and when I shot around to ask her what her problem was, she had a serious look on her face and was shaking her head no. Luckily, my friend was way smarter than me and did already have a handle on the concept of stranger danger. The driver continues,
"Well, you might get sick if you stay out in this rain too long. Why don't you let us give you a ride home?"
My friend shook her head at the man. "No, thank you." She then proceeded to grab my hand and start pulling me away, moving ever so slightly faster than our previous pace. The car slowly creeped next to us, the driver not giving up that easily.
"Really, I insist. Wouldn't want you to catch a cold."
My friend kept pulling me forward, and without even looking at him, replied in a slightly firmer tone, "No, thank you. We're fine." She started walking even faster, me finally picking up on her energy and matching my pace to hers. Then we heard a car door open. I took a quick glance back, and I saw that the larger man, who hadn't said a word at this point, was getting out of the car. My panic mode kicked in. "Run!" As I shouted, I turned to start running through the grass and in between people's trailers. I heard my friend running directly behind me. We didn't have any idea where we were running to. We just knew we had to get away from those men. After a bit, we saw her teenage cousin's trailer. We sprinted into it and burst through the door. Luckily, they were home and it was unlocked. We locked the door behind us and frantically looked out the windows, breathing a sigh of relief as we saw no sign of the men or their car. My friend's cousin ran into the room and upon seeing us, breathing heavy and clutching our chests, asked us what the hell was going on. My friend told her everything that happened. She told us to sit down on the couch and relax a bit, just happy we were all right. We ended up staying there a few hours, watching Disney movies. Her cousin then drove us to our respected homes, telling us she doesn't want us walking around without a grown-up or a bigger kid like her anymore. I had absolutely no protests to that. I never saw those two men again, and at the age of 23, I still sometimes lose sleep, wondering what would have happened if my friend hadn't been so smart, or if we hadn't been able to outrun that man. A little over a year ago, my fiancé and I sold our house in the city and moved an hour away to a rural town. We got an amazing deal on our home, which is rare in today's market, and have been enjoying our new quiet life, oceanside. Our home is just off the highway and sits on about an acre of land. We have a neighbor on either side of us, but the properties are lined by trees and a river, so it's pretty private. There's nobody directly across from us, and beyond our backyard is the ocean. It's probably important to note that our driveway is probably 100 feet long, so anyone who comes to the door is either invited or Amazon. When we first moved in, we were getting weird vibes from the neighbor on the right. A few times, we saw him watching us through his attic window that looked down onto our back deck. He would also emerge from the bushes and stand beside the gate to our fence that leads to the ocean. Overall, he seemed weird, mostly harmless, but we installed a front porch cam on the front door, just in case. My fiancé doesn't like to leave any lights on at night at all, not even a front porch light. This never bothered me though. The porch cam we installed has night vision, and the picture is pretty clear at night, so if anyone came up to our door in the middle of the night, we would be able to see them clearly. The camera has an app that sends notifications to our phones when motion is detected. You can also watch the camera on live view and talk to people outside. One night, we decided to go to bed early because we weren't feeling well. We did the usual turn off all the lights and headed to bed with our 3 dogs. It was only 9 p.m., but it was winter, so it was pitch black outside. The only light coming from a few solar lights we have on our steps and the street light at the end of the driveway. We were just dozing off when I heard a noise. I thought I was hearing things because none of the dogs reacted. Typically, one will hear a noise and start barking, and then the other 2 join in. I asked my fiancé if she heard anything, and she said no. Then I heard it again, and instantly I knew someone was at our door. Panicked, I told my fiancé to open the porch camera app and check the live view while I flicked the lamp on. She started off by telling me that if someone was there, she would have gotten a notification. When she picked her phone up and turned the screen on, there it was. Motion detected. We exchanged a confused look, and my heart jumped into my throat when she opened the live view. Standing on our porch was a young woman with no pants on. She was wearing a puffy jacket, and her shoes slipped on, so the heels of her shoes were crushed under her feet, like she left somewhere in a hurry. She had opened her screen door and was knocking repeatedly on the entry door while staring towards the road. She then shifted her gaze towards our cars and then tried to peek through the stained glass on our entry door. My fiancé decided that this woman was trafficked, had escaped her captors, and needed our help. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, watching this woman knocking on my door. I wasn't getting the same feeling my fiancé was. This didn't look like a woman in distress to me. Her behavior was strange and felt sinister. My fiancé threw on a sweater and was making her way to the bedroom door. I asked her where the hell she was going, and she frantically replied, "She needs our help." I don't know how I convinced her to stay in the bedroom, but I did. It felt weird to call the police because of someone at your door, but because she appeared to have no pants on, and my gut told me to, I called 911. After I got off the phone with dispatch, we checked the camera again, and she was gone. 20 minutes later, an officer called me. She thanked me profusely for calling and let me know that they had found the woman walking along the highway. I felt like the wind was knocked out of me when she proceeded to tell me that the woman now has pants on and was accompanied by a male. The officer further explained that the pair said that they were looking to use a phone. I explained to the officer that we have the whole thing on camera and there is no male in the picture, which led us both to conclude that he was likely hiding behind our cars or in the bushes beside the steps. I also explained that we don't leave any lights on, so if someone was looking to use a phone, why would they choose the house that's pitch black? The officer agreed that they were likely up to no good, and again thanked me for calling. Nothing like that has happened since. I'll never know the true intent of the pantsless woman and her hidden partner, and my gut tells me that's a good thing. I unfortunately have a plethora of these kinds of stories. I encountered a ton of creeps as a teen, and this story is about one of them. Back in high school, I lived pretty closely to my school building. It was maybe a 15 to 20 minute walk at the most. In my senior year, I had 2 free periods at the end of my day instead of class. I took extra courses in night school and summer school the year before, so I'd usually start walking home around 1 to 1:30 or so. The area I used to live in was extremely quiet, to the point where depending on certain weather or time of day, it was unnerving to walk the streets. It was suburbia, but the kind where people barely come out of their houses. It was a super rainy day, the sky was murky, and no one was outside, not even for a walk, despite it being daylight. I had my headphones in, listening to music on the way home. I was nearing a small library around the corner from my house, when out of the corner of my eye, I noticed this large van with tinted windows. No one was parked near the library because it was closed that day. Odd, I thought, that someone was choosing to park there now. I continue walking until I hear a muffled sound. Curious, I took one of my earbuds out and looked up to my right. The front seat of the van had rolled down their window, and I could now see the face of a middle-aged man with a mustache. I was confused, wondering, was he talking to me? And he drove slowly alongside me, presumably repeating what I didn't hear earlier.
Are you alone?
An alarm immediately went off in my head. There was no one in sight, and I was a small teenager who didn't know what to do. I panicked, put my earbud back in, and as I turned around promptly to walk the other way, he began to glare intensely at me and turn his van around to follow me. My music was paused, and I was pretending I didn't hear him. I had 2 choices, the elementary school coming up ahead, or back from where I came. The back of the elementary school was hard to reach quickly, and I was scared I'd corner myself in. I kept walking quickly, not looking at the van following me. I was on the way back to my high school. Once I got closer, the van sped away quickly. It was getting towards the end of the school day there, and the people were starting to leave. Almost hyperventilating, I go into the office and tell the secretary everything that had happened. I got my mother to pick me up, and as we drove home, I described the van to her. We reported it to the police, and the next day, I was picked up earlier from school. My mother, the smart woman she is, decided to drive by the library that day, around the time I'd usually walk home. It was quiet out, as usual. Then she saw a van with tinted windows, as I described to her. It was parked, waiting for someone, waiting for me. We gave the police the license plate and explained our concerns. When we checked back in on them, they told us that they found the owner of the van. He was renting the basement of a house nearby the library. He said that he was there waiting to pick up his kids. The elementary school wouldn't have been let out until nearly 4 p.m., so why was he hanging out there around 1 p.m.? It was clearly a lie. Police just said they'd keep an eye on him, and that they weren't within their rights to do anything else. Frustratingly, the last update we got was that he moved away shortly after, with no consequences.